Welcome to my chess lecture on the pen. There's actually two pens in this chess position. Let me show you just one of them. This black bishop is attacking this knight. Now this knight doesn't want to move, because if it moves, then the black bishop will just come and capture the queen. Here's what I mean. So let's say the knight moves to this square here, okay? Now the black bishop can come and capture the queen, and we know that the queen is more valuable than the bishop, so that means this knight does not want to move there. It's sort of immobilized. It doesn't want to move because it would allow the capture of the queen. So let's go over some definitions. Here's sort of a more technical definition of the pen. A pen is a direct attack on a piece with an indirect attack on a screened piece. And the screened piece is just the piece behind the directly attacked piece. So in our situation, the bishop was directly attacking the knight, but it was indirectly attacking the queen. Okay? So, and then in the pen, or maybe I should continue, the pen is an effective tactic because it immobilizes the chess piece, making it vulnerable to future attack and capture. So basically what it's doing is that the pen is really making it so where the knight cannot move. You know, how good is the knight if it can't move? Now let me continue the lecture by saying, basically the pen always involves three pieces. The pinning piece, and in our case it was the bishop, and actually only a rook, a bishop, or queen can be the pinning piece. The pin piece, and in our case it was a knight, and the screen piece, which is of greater value than the pin piece. Okay, so in our situation, we had the pin piece, the knight, the pinning piece, the bishop, and the screen piece, the queen, which was of greater value than the knight. Okay, and then just to cover a little bit more, if the screen piece is a king, then the pen is called absolute, and if the screen piece is not a king, then the pen is called relative. In my situation here, we actually had a relative pen because this piece is the pen piece, the knight is not the king. And what really the difference between absolute and relative is that in a relative pen, the pen piece can actually move, where in the other pen on the board, the pen piece cannot move. So if I clear here, let me show you the other pen, which is actually an absolute pen. Here this bishop is directly attacking the knight and indirectly attacking the king, because the king is more valuable than the knight. But unfortunately, the knight cannot move, because if the knight moved, this would allow the capture of the king, and this is not allowed in chess. So by rule, this knight can actually not move. Okay, so it actually is immobilized. So let me go over some common chess tactics using the pen. Well, the first two themes I just want to go over are the two that I already have on the board. And let me show you these two themes. The sort of common pen themes are, the first one is the knight pinned to the king or to the queen. That's exactly what we have here. It's common in chess to see these type of pens going on, where usually it involves the bishop, and the bishop will come, and rather the bishop will pin the knight to the king, or the bishop will pin the knight to the queen, and just making it to where the knight cannot move. Okay? Usually that means there's something going on in the middle of the board on one of these four squares, and if the knight cannot move, then it can't really capture or guard any of these central squares. Okay, so like in this situation, you know, this knight here would not be able to guard are moved to any one of these two squares. Okay? Now, the next thing is breaking the pin. If I'm going to tell you how to set up one, I might as well tell you how to break one. So, how do you break a pin? Well, if it was white's turn, white could just actually, or there's two common ways. One is to bring the bishop back. Now we do not have a pin, because if this knight moves, or the bishop is still directly attacking the knight, but the screen piece is now of equal value, so this is not a pin, and the knight can freely move. Another way is to sort of hit it with a pawn. They're sometimes called pawn pokes. You're gonna sort of say, hey, I'm gonna move this pawn up and attack it. So now the knight, or this bishop, has to decide, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to capture. Am I going to move away? So this bishop could capture, then we just recapture with our queen. No biggie, it's just an exchange of a knight for a bishop. Or just, bishop could move away, breaking the pin. Or could even try to preserve the pin by moving backwards. But this is one way to try to break the pin. Okay? Sort of like even on the opposite side, this means black could try to break the pin this way. Okay? So that's how two typical ways of trying to break the pin. Okay, another theme is called the pawn poke. So I already described maybe poking, moving up this piece here, and poking to break the pin, but pawn poking to win this piece. So let's say black was trying to get this piece right here. Well, there's a way to, what we would want to do is try to advance this pawn and sort of attack it, poking it. Okay? So let's just say white moved its knight to here, and then black moves its pawn up, and then white does a silly move like castling. Well, now we just move the pawn up. Now look at this. We don't want to move this knight because we'd lose the queen. Okay, and then on the next move, this pawn is going to be able to capture this knight. So this is sort of like advancing a pawn and poking it and capturing it. Let's cover another one called sort of piling up, and there's sort of a nice chess term. It's called pin and win, meaning you pin the piece and then you sort of pile up your pieces on the piece, the pinned piece, and then you win it. Okay, here let me show you an example of that. Okay, let's say instead of let's say I move my queen up. These are just sort of some maybe typical moves. These aren't the best moves to play, but this is just an example of piling up and winning using the pin. So here we're using, there's a pin right here. Okay, so we're going to pile up on this piece right here, or white's going to do this. Actually, we're just going to try to win the pawn. Actually, we're going to try to win this pawn right here. But let me show you an example. So let's say we just move our queen to here. Let's say black just moves its knight over the g6, and now maybe we threaten to win, move our queen up, and we threaten to win this piece here because it's unguarded. And then now black sees that and decides to play this pawn up. And now we sort of have it set up to where we can win this pawn because this piece can't move, and we can win it by force. So that was actually covered in a previous lecture. And all we do is we take the knight with check. Black recaptures, and now we just capture this pawn with the queen, and actually it would be nice because we'll end up giving check at the same time. Okay, so that's actually how we can use the pin to win from this pawn right here. In some cases, you'll actually be able to win the entire piece, and that's really your goal if you can actually get there. But in this situation, this was good to take that pawn. Okay, the last thing I want to mention very briefly is a situational pawn. This is a pin where moving the pinned piece will result in a loss of material or checkmate. It doesn't necessarily involve a screened piece. Or let me show you what I mean. Meaning, let's say black's king was here and white's rook just gave it check. Now it's white's turn. Now this piece here is actually pinned, because if white moves his knight, then black will deliver checkmate on this square. Okay, so while there's no screened piece, this piece cannot move or would be